Now, it's your boy, Ike, with another episode of Create or Die. I'm fresh back from a vacation with the family in a little place we like to call San Diego, California. It was amazing. The weather was just right. Low, mid-70s. It was beautiful. And while I feel rejuvenated, I don't know if I've got the energy I need. So bear with me. I've been pounding one of these bad boys, Coca-Cola Classic, Red Can Edition. If you haven't had one in a while, I recommend it. Oh yeah, love me some Coke. But seriously, folks, here we are, coming back at you, another week, dropping some knowledge nugs. This time it's on creativity. What better to talk about on a podcast entitled Create or Die than creativity to the T. We're here for you. So buckle on up and let's get this thing going. So like I said, fresh back from SoCal, soaking up that sun. Got a little bit of color. If you see white flakes falling from my hat, got a little burnt, and that's what's going on there. It's nothing shady, shady. Now, before we get started with the meat of this episode, this extra special, super saucy, knowledge nug laden show, before we get there, I just want to do a little shout out. You know what I'm saying? I want to shout you out. That's right. You listening or watching to the podcast right now. I'm talking to you. You've told your friends, you've told your family, you've been to the website, createordie.net. You've gone to the YouTube channel at create-or-die, create or die, and you've been watching, you've been dropping comments, you've been sending me support in the DMs. It's all super helpful, but let's not lose that momentum. Let's keep it going. Tell your coworkers, tell your mom, whoever. And I know that as we inch towards that centennial mark of 100 episodes, big things are going to happen. We've talked about it in previous episodes. We've got the truck being wrapped as another way to get the word out. I've created some patches to show your support, and we've got a few left. If you want to reach out, let me know. We'll get you one of those. It's just pouring in. And what's even more important than just supporting me, which you may not care, which is totally cool, which is fine. It's about supporting the creative community, the creator community that we are all a part of. We need to support one another as we're trying to, demonstrate our value to ourselves, to our customers, to our bosses, to our stakeholders, whoever. You've heard this whole aphorism or whatever you want to call it around freaking starving artists. That's a thing of the past. Everything in today's visual media rich world is created intentionally by artists, designers, writers, filmmakers, poets, crafters, manifestors, whatever. It's all being created. Developers. Sure, there are tools out there, AI, we're worried about them taking our job, whatever. I saw a funny meme from a colleague of mine, previous guest on the show, Anna Lee, who shared something along the lines of, our jobs are safe because we need to rely on non-creatives or clients or whoever to create accurate prompts to get what it is they're looking for. So like if you're trying to create something in Midjourney or even ChatGPT, Dolly, whatever, it's an art form in and of itself just to create those prompts or in a way that's going to, get you the result you're looking for. And so rest assured, our jobs are safe, at least for a little while. But no, seriously, there's always going to be a place for those who do, those who build, those who create. And that's who I'm talking about. And that's who I'm talking to. That's you. So keep it coming. Let's make this huge. Let's blow it up. Let's get up there on them charts. Let's continue to subscribe, all that good stuff. Okay. Now, without further ado, this is a how-to, step-by-step guide, high level, but pretty good, I think, of what it takes to create. We're calling this From Brainstorm to Brilliance, the anatomy of creativity. Sounds fancy, right? Well, in my 15 plus years of working in agencies or in-house, working with, people with fancy backgrounds, Harvard grads, Stanford, you name it, MIT, there's one thing that is consistent, and that's the fact that they're looking to get something done, and we, as creatives, need to convey the confidence that that thing is going to get done, because we've been there before. We've ridden that pony. We've seen that show, and as we continue to do and try and stretch ourselves, it's easy to confidently go in front of these people who maybe are seniors in years, in tenure, in official fancy education and diplomas hanging on their walls or whatever the case may be. Don't be intimidated, because you are the expert at what you do. And that doesn't mean that we don't, value what non-creatives have to say or contribute or create, arguments or contention around the fact that we are experts at what we do. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the confidence to be able to go in there and say, you want this delivered? This is the process. These are the steps we take. This is what I need from you. This is what you can expect from me. All that good stuff. And so I've tried to distill that down into 9 steps, essentially, that can be applied to any project. Whether you're working on a landing page for a website or a brochure, a little social ad, or even a full-length animated feature film. What the heck, right? Start another Pixar, an Illumination, DreamWorks, whatever. You can do it. And let me know when you do, because I'd like to be a part of that action. But seriously. So to get started, let's just define what it is that creativity is. Let's define creativity. And here's how Google defines it. And I'm sure they pulled it from some other reputable place like Webster's or something like that. Creativity is the tendency to generate or recognize ideas, alternatives, or possibilities that may be useful in solving problems, communicating with others, and entertaining ourselves and others. So I think that's pretty good, and it opened up my eyes a little bit to exactly what creativity is, and that you may be more creative than even you think you are. Are you creative in your communication with others, for example? Some of the examples of creativity are problem solving, which, people solve problems with math, and since when is that creative? That's like the opposite of creative, right? No, not so fast. Mathematicians would argue and say that it's super creative. And I would say math and problem solving definitely, dance around that programming world that we talk about from time to time. So that's an example of creativity. Writing, of course, creative writing, or even the way that you write for some corporate website, right? You need to find that right voice. Decisions are made to decide, are we trying to be, super knowledgeable and stuffy and sophisticated and stick in a bunch of buzzwords, or are we trying to be approachable and use terms that anybody could understand? Visual art, of course, that's where I live most of my creative world in, and I assume many of you. In visual art, that can be anything from paintings to graphic design to interior design to animation and so forth. And communicating with others, which can be vocally, the written word, and also through design. Really, the best design communicates clearly. Good design doesn't mean that it's the most beautiful or the most detailed or the best color palette. It means really the best design is that design that communicates most clearly and to the audience that it's intended to move, to do something, to act. And then finally, example of creativity from Google, the Google search, is open-mindedness. So we've got all of these opinions in the world today, right? And I'm not going to get political or anything like that, but too many of us are stuck in our little closed-minded world, and those of you who call yourselves creative should be open-minded. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that your mind needs to change with every passing fad. It just means that you're being a communicator. You're listening, you're hearing, and then you're internalizing and making an educated decision on how you're going to feel about that. So there you go. We've set the stage. What is creativity? What are examples of creativity? Now we got to get started. We got to define it, right? And so to do that, you ask yourself a few questions. Now, this is me thinking back on, those 15, 16 years of experience that I've had and trying to distill that down. But candidly, I may have missed something. I don't know it all. I'm always learning. I'm just dropping these nugs, and if it helps you, great. If it don't, then let me know. Tell me where I'm wrong. I'd love to hear it. I'm open-minded about it, if you will. So, first question to define the project is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because if we go back to the definition and the examples, problem solving, huge part of it. And then what does success look like? How do we know that what we've created is good enough objectively? Does it do the job? Does it communicate? Does it speak to the audience? And speaking of audience, the third question is, who is your target audience? If you can answer those three questions, then you can get moving with the rest of the project. Okay, so next is brainstorming. Now, this works best when you can bounce ideas off of others. You've got the pizza rule. You know, you don't want any more people in a room for a meeting than can be serviced by 2 pizzas, I believe is the rule. So, you know, how many slices of pizza are there? You know, like 8. So let's say everybody, 8 slices per pizza. Everybody has 2 slices. That's 8 people. Everybody has 1 slice. Maybe you got a bunch of skinny people. Then you can have 16 people. Okay, so it's really if you got 8 Ikes, then your meeting may be too big, because I'm usually a 3-4 slice type of guy. Okay, so just putting that where it is. All right. But yeah, brainstorming, bouncing those ideas off of someone else or multiple people, that's where the magic happens for sure. And if you have too many people, then it's hard for people to want to speak up or share their ideas, and you're spending a bunch of time trying to coax it out. I've had some of my best brainstorming sessions with like me and 1 other person, or maybe 2 other people, and where they're all in on the idea. The idea of making something cool, because you're still trying to figure out what the idea is, but they're just like open-minded, and they're like in this mode of there's no such thing as a bad idea. And I would argue that the crazier, the more random the idea is, the better for this type of thing, because that's where you're able to really discover things that have not been discovered before. Okay, so you get you some friends, some collaborators, some co-workers, and that's the sweet spot. But let's say you ain't got no friends, or you're doing a personal project, it's just you. What do you do? Well, if you're working solo, that's great. You can start thinking about like asking yourself some questions like, okay, if I'm the part of the demo, the target demographic, target audience, then, and I like, vintage 80s technology and 80s cartoons, or 90s sitcoms, or whatever. How do we mesh those together? So that can get the ideas rolling. And then maybe you say, I love 80s technology, like that cassette, winding knobs, physical stuff, Back to the Future, panels on the DeLorean, whatever, the flux capacitor. How do I take that and marry it with the technologies of today and tomorrow? VR, holograms, just the iPhone, headsets, whatever, that may get the ideas going. And I'm getting a little off track here, trying to dive in and be prescriptive of how you might do it. But yeah, start asking yourself some ideas of like, what are the coolest things and how can we mash them together? Because that would make something even cooler, right? Or, what are some of my favorite movies or inspiring pieces of design, if that's what it is you're doing, if you're looking to, and this will get us into future steps here, so I'll stop there. But yeah, a group brainstorming, best 2 to 3 people, my recommendation. No more than what 2 pizzas can service, which would be 8 to 16 people, I would say, max. And then if you're by yourself, start asking yourself some questions, but then you can get, in this new fancy world that we live in, the help of AI or just tools online to help you generate ideas. There are random idea generators, so if you just don't know where in the heck to start from, go to an idea generator, and they might have you, pick an animal, or you just hit go and it'll randomly put 2 things together or 3 things, and as you work through those, it may get you to think a little differently. And then with AI, maybe you start with a prompt with Midjourney just to see what it generates, and it may be totally different from what you're expecting, and that can be kind of like a human collaborator, right? How do we build off of that? Like, oh, that's cool, but what if it were done in this style? Or if it had this film noir, overtone, whatever. So, brainstorming, that's step number 2. Now, up next, something like I call story beats. And you might say, hey, how did you come up with such a sweet term? Well, easy, I didn't come up with it. In watching Masterclass, plug, some good stuff in there, and I think I've talked about it in the past. I believe it was Ron Howard talked about really any good movie is just a series of story beats that are strung together. And so what are story beats? Well, if it's a 30-second spot, it might be, that part where your main character does something funny that makes you realize that, oh, they really need this product, and what are some of those funny things that they might do. Or if you're, creating a web page, a landing page, that's going to have story beats as well. We know there's got to be a call to action, for example. Okay, that's what I'm calling a story beat. What is that call to action? How do we kind of introduce the problem at hand? That might be up there in the hero section. Or what is the solution? How are we going to solve your problem, Mr. or Mrs. Customer type person? Those are story beats. So, think about those. And those can be captured via handwriting, notes, typing it up, audible vocal recorder, or my personal favorite is little thumbnail sketches on the iPad or in a sketchbook. Like, I have this little character, this little world that I'm building around this character called Seamus, who is this awkward Mr. Bean inspired Irish guy who finds himself in silly situations. And so I'll think of a location for him, like, okay, he's gone up camping. What are some funny things that this guy might end up in? Okay, he might get tangled up in his tent. He might, be chopping down some wood and disturb a hive of bees, and they start chasing him. He might be sleeping and wake up on the lake or floating down a river on top of his air mattress. He runs into a bear. Whatever. You see what I'm saying? You can kind of scribble those out either in quick written form or in a sketch form and kind of explore, like, is that funny, this little still frame? It's almost like little comic book panels. And then just let it soak there and come up with other ideas. And after you've filled up a page or two of little doodles, then, or if you're not a drawer, you're a writer, then little one-liners. Then that takes us to the next step, which I'm calling story weaving. That's where we take those story beats and we rearrange them in a way that makes sense to tell our story, you know. And it could be that simple. Like if it's a web page, it might be relatively straightforward. We know we want the call to action at the end, and maybe we want a soft call to action higher up. You know, what do we need to do to link those up? Well, we didn't call this a story beat, but as I'm looking through this and I'm trying to weave my overall story, I can see I don't have any proof points to help support, you know, me as a vendor or a company who you as the customer might want to work with. You know, here are some proof points from customers just like you who've used our services and are living a perfect life now because their problems have been solved or whatever. So, you know, it could be fairly quick, straightforward, this whole story weaving process, or it may be one of the longest and most critical parts, because story is king, right? We've heard that before. And so if you're creating a novel, writing a novel, or producing an animated short, then, you know, the story weaving is going to be important. And you may even bounce back to story beats because you may have started to weave stuff together and found some big holes, and then you're like, you know, I'm going to go back to the story beat stage for this scene and just throw out these random ideas. Or you can go back to brainstorming even if necessary. And so it's also important to note that while I think this is a pretty solid foundation or flow for how these steps should transpire, you can switch them around. You can go a certain distance, circle back around. It's up to you. The important thing is that you produce something that's tried and true. Okay, so next step, rough cut. Rough cut. That's right. So this could be your wireframe or an animatic. So let's say you've done your story beats for this little animated short, and you've done the weaving of the story, have a pretty good idea. Maybe you've recorded some scratch audio, and that could be part of this rough cut. It would be part of this rough cut stage where you're going to get, you know, professional voice talent, but you go ahead and record it for yourself first. You just, you know, play the different characters or play narrator and read out your rough script. Read out your rough script, and then take your story beats or storyboards and put that to your rough scratch audio in Premiere or whatever video editing software you have, and then just produce something that is timed. And at this stage, you know, you may need to do some of that storyboarding or create some stand-in titles, or, you know, even create some rough sound effects or drop in some temporary music. It's a pretty big stage, and it all depends on what it is you're producing. You know, if you're creating a landing page, this rough cut may just be wireframe, where you're like, here's the box, here's the initial copy, and maybe we don't have copy for this module yet or this section. We'll just drop in some quick lorem ipsum or dummy copy, and then here's, you know, my quick pass at what the CTA or call to action should be, and then share it with your stakeholders or target audience, you know, a little focus group. So there you go. And that, I'm blending these steps together, so that sharing kind of is this next step. The research and look dev. So research could be anything from, hey, here's our initial ideas as far as wireframes or prototypes or animatics, and you focus group or stakeholders review them, give us your feedback. That's one way of looking at research, but also important is research of what currently exists, or gathering inspiration. So let's say you're creating a web page, a landing page for a website. You're going to drive traffic there. You've got some kind of carousel in your wireframe, but you've decided, hey, this is for a motocross company, and so it's got to have this kind of edgy, dirt splattered, maybe the controls look like something you'd find on a dirt bike. You've got to twist the handle to make the carousel move. Now I'm getting crazy, but what's been created out there? Is there anything like that? Can I convey that kind of experience to my users? And then let's research that. What does that look like from a development perspective? Is the time that it would take and the investment needed to produce something custom like that worth it? Or is the incremental value to the customer not that great, and therefore we should just get something off the shelf and make it look as nice as possible? And maybe it's not in the interactions where we've done something unique and fun, but instead it's just in the creative, the digital side of things. So that's kind of the research half of this step. But then look dev, that's taking this research that we've compiled. Maybe we're sticking with this motocross landing page concept, and we've looked at competitors, we've looked at maybe other industries that are outdoor and aggressive sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, and pulling cues from there, and color palettes, because maybe this is a new brand and they're still flexible there. Or part of the research was, hey, this is the brand guides, and so we need to stick to these colors. You can see there's a million different directions you can go, but it's the look dev part of that is just throwing something on your digital paper, right? Whether you're using Photoshop or Figma or Sketch or Illustrator, whatever it is, get it out there and be quick about it initially, maybe that you're going to have custom photography, but rather than letting that hold you back, you grab a stock photo, or even a copyrighted Google photo, because you're not going to use it. It's just a stand-in to communicate to the stakeholders what it is you're looking to produce. So it's a big step, research and look dev. Then after you've played around with that, and you've got your feedback from the rough cut, it's time to move on to that clean cut, that first clean cut. Then that may be Mockups if it's this web page idea, or it may be that you take the rough cut of your animatic, the video that you're producing, and you start to replace a couple of those shots or sections of the video with something clean and polished based on the look dev that you established in the previous step. So rather than waiting until you can produce this, you're creating a 5-minute spot and you've got 5 minutes of just beauty, rather than waiting for that point, give them 20 seconds of beauty, share it with the stakeholders again, and say, ignore the fact that there's most of it's still rough, but just focus on these clean sections from these time codes or these shots, and tell me, are you liking this direction? Do we have your go ahead to move forward? You know, we're trying to avoid huge revisions at a costly stage is essentially what we're doing. And then I would say, depending on your client and the relationship you have, or your boss, whoever the stakeholders are, you know, you want to get those in front of them often. So if it's this video example, you know, every 2 or 3 sections that you update, send it to them. If after your, you know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th cut, they're pretty happy and revisions are minor, go ahead and complete a clean cut. Send it to them for final refinements, not even revisions at this point, because we've given you that chance right before. So we're hoping at this stage they're just refinements. But if they're not, then, you know, hopefully you've communicated, and maybe that's a step I should have added to this about expectations. But I would say that falls under what does success look like under the definition stage. So yeah, we're safe. We don't have to add an extra step. But just make sure that as you define the project, you're setting those expectations so that when you get to this point of the project, you're able to say, hey, Mr. Customer or boss, you wanted this done by this date for X amount of money, but you know, I've given you opportunities up to this point to change it, where if changes had been made at that point, there are no repercussions. But now that we're at this advanced stage in the process, you know, we got to be real. Obviously, you're my boss. Money is no object or whatever. I still get paid my salary regardless, so if you want me to spend another extra 2 weeks on this to do this, great, we'll do it. But if it's due tomorrow, then I can give you the, you know, 10-hour version of these revisions, but we just have to realize that these are extensive and they're not going to look as good as they could. But I'm going to do my best. You know, maybe this section won't be fluid 30 frames per second animation, but we'll have to do some kind of stuttered, time remapped, what's the term? No, posterization of time, where it looks like it's only, you know, 6 frames a second, and we're able to get you something that'll work. So I got a little deep there into that world of, you know, video animation production, but hope it makes sense. Essentially, this is the process. Now, next step, final 2 steps, where we're down to the end here. Step number 8 is iterate, and it rhymes. Iterate. 8, you gotta iterate. To create, you gotta iterate, right? Okay, I should be fired right now. I apologize. If you've dropped at this point, I don't blame you. That was uncalled for. Apologize. But iterate, I mean, that needs no explanation, all right? Essentially, go back, do some of these other steps, you know, polish, refine, until you get it to a place where everyone's 100% happy and nirvana has been reached, or you're at the end of your time frame, and done is better than perfect. And like most of my projects, I'm never 100% happy, or I've never been at the place where I could say, I can't identify a single thing about this that I wouldn't change. But to move forward and live and actually get paid, you've got to say, hey, this is good enough. We're going to ship it. We'll learn from this and we'll make it better next time. And that is the process of creativity. That, my friends, is how we create brilliance from Brainstorm. From Brainstorm to Brilliance. The anatomy of creativity. So let me know if you like this kind of deeper dive into one area. I touched on the process of creating animated video type content, as well as web design and production. I didn't get into development stages or logo design or any of these other areas, and I'm happy to talk about those, because as a creative leader generalist, I've been part of all of these different types of projects and have seen them successfully through to completion time and time again. But I can also add this to the rostrum for guests to weigh in on. Find some experts out there on animation or logo identity design. You let me know. What do you think? Are you that guest? Do you want to jump on the Cod Pod? Create or Die podcast? You let me know. Let's do this. Okay? So, thanks again for joining me on another episode. And until next time, my friends, keep on creating. Create or die.